I was 6 years old. We lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the older section of town, in an apartment building called the Cathedral Mansions. Every day I walked home from school with my stepmother and my sister, and we passed by a very famous place, WQED, and it was rumored to me that Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was filmed in that location. Every single day I would walk by slowly, hoping to catch a glimpse of my hero. However, he didn't ever come out. And then one day my stepmother said, "Look, Megan, who's over there?" And I looked, and it was my hero, Mr. Rogers, in life. Anyway, we went up to him, and I introduced myself. I introduced my family to him, and he said, "Megan, would you like to sing a song with me?" Would I ever like to sing a song? Do pigeons fly in Pittsburgh? Heck yes. And so together we sang "It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood." And that was a moment in my life that I will never ever forget. It's a top 5 moment of my life. Now, Mr. Rogers, since 1968, has influenced families all over the world by helping parents and their children speak with each other about their feelings, observations, and basically how to communicate with each other through talk and play and music. His calm demeanor brought the very best out of everybody. He was a man ahead of his time. With somebody as influential as Fred Rogers, there are so many stories that I could share with you, but there's a few that I want to do with you today. The first one is about when he addressed Congress in 1968, and he spoke with John Pastore, the senator from Rhode Island, about not cutting the funding for children's public television. So that's one thing that I'd like to share with you today. I'd also like to speak with you about how he taught people how to share their feelings and to communicate through music and talk and play. And then I'd also like to share with you some things that people said to him right before he passed away, as well as what they said about him posthumously. Before he got into television, did you know that he was going to go into the seminary for the Presbyterian Church? One day he was home from school and he watched television with his parents, and he said, "I'm going to get into TV." And his parents said, "You've never even really watched television." He said, "What I've seen here with people throwing pies in each other's faces, something's got to change." And thus the history of children's television has changed forever since that day. In 1969, the Vietnam War was going on, and President Nixon had decided that he needed to do some funding cuts. And one of those things was going to be funding for the Corporation of Public Television. Senator John Pastore was a tough politician. He was running the proceedings, and he had listened to so many people was listening to so many people giving testimony about why this should happen. Or why this shouldn't happen. And they just read their statements. They didn't speak from the heart. Fred Rogers came to the microphone, and he had a statement prepared, but he decided that he was going to speak from his heart instead. Now, Pastore listened. He was not convinced. But Fred said, "This is what I give. I give an expression of care every day to each child, to help him or her realize that he or she is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are." And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health. He also shared the lyrics to one of his songs. Pastore responded with, "I'm supposed to be a really tough politician, and this is the first time I've had goosebumps for the last 2 days. You've just earned your $20 million back." Pastore was so impressed with Fred Rogers' impassioned plea and presentation about children and their feelings. Next, I'm going to share with you how Fred influenced millions of children around the world over the past 50 years. At that time, children's television was very chaotic. There was all kinds of activity, lots of colors, crazy music. all these characters in these costumes running around, lots of shenanigans and crazy, crazy music. Didn't allow children to react, or allowed children to react, not act. And so Fred Rogers decided to do something very, very different. One thing that he did when he was teaching is that he made really good use of silence. On the camera, when he was, showing round things, he would say, "Is this round?" And then he'd give the child who was watching an opportunity to react. When he would make observations, like saying, "Oh, this water feels so good on my feet," he actually used silence, and the camera panned down to his feet with the hose and the wading pool. And so this was unheard of. Music was a huge part of his show, and he wrote so many songs. He wrote how to deal with anger, procrastination, being happy, being afraid, being proud, being different. And so these were all subjects that he was very concerned about with, in his show, and he wanted to teach children all about that. In the neighborhood of make-believe, in the beginning, there were 9 puppets with different personalities and 5 human actors. He talked about a lot of things that were important to children, and the one that expressed the most as a child was Daniel Stripe the Tiger. He was often concerned about things that were happening in the neighborhood of make-believe, and often these subjects were things that were reflected in the show that Fred Rogers did in the house. Watching these, kids felt really good deep down inside. Next, I'm going to speak about how he has been considered since the year about 2000. Mr. Rogers worked almost until he passed away at the age of 73. He was so trusted and so beloved that America turned to him for comfort after 9/11. He became an American public figure. He was so well trusted and so beloved that people turned to him and flocked to him whenever a tragedy or some kind of interesting thing happened in our country. He was turned to in 2001, when 9/11 happened, and he took a really long time trying to decide exactly what he was going to say to the American public. He sat in front of the castle in the neighborhood of make-believe with his grand piano, and he sat there and he played and he thought about what he wanted to say, and he was brokenhearted over what had happened. But what he said to the country helped them so much. Now, here's something that completely shocked me. He actually had critics. There was a man named Don Chance who was a professor, and he was having students come to him saying, "I need extra points so that I can have an A." And he would ask them, "Why do you think you deserve it?" "Well, because I'm special." Well, he figured out that these were kids who, when they were younger, they were watching Mr. Rogers and believed that what he was saying was that you're so special that you don't have to do anything to be good at what you do. You're just special. You can get whatever you want. That is not the message that Mr. Rogers was giving. And so they felt entitled. He blamed it on Mr. Rogers. And then there was a journalist named Jen Kim who wrote in Psychology Today entitled, "He Lied to Me." She blamed him for her failure in the career that she wanted to be in. She had 10 jobs in 2 years, and she never felt special the way she expected to as a child in her adulthood. And then finally on Fox and Friends, this is terrible. They were bantering about several of these different articles, and somebody on Fox News actually said that he was an evil man. They used titles such as "Blame Mr. Rogers," "Encourage generations of children that they were so special because you're you." He didn't say, if you want to be special, you're going to have to work hard. And now all these kids are growing up and they're realizing, hey, wait a minute, Mr. Rogers lied to me. I'm not special. I'm trying hard and I'm not getting anywhere. So with that, I'd like to say that he struggled. He struggled a lot. And something that he wrote towards the end of his life was this: am I kidding myself that I'm able to write a script again? Am I really just whistling Dixie? I wonder if I don't get down to it, I'll never really know. Why don't I trust myself? After all these years, it's just as bad as ever. The hour cometh, and now is when I've got to do it. Get to it, Fred. Get to it. But don't tell anyone, else it was easy. It wasn't. To Mr. Rogers, having inherent value did not mean that one would have an easy journey on the road to success. So let's review about what we know about Mr. Rogers. Today I've shared with you some stories about him and the kind, calm man that he was, who changed public television for children forever. I've shared with you how he taught children and their parents how to communicate and show love and express their feelings. I shared with you a little about his legacy and what others thought of him right before and right after he passed away. Fred Rogers posthumously is a light to so many people. He created an opportunity for children to know that they had inherent value, that they had the strength to do things like control their anger, beat off the procrastination monster, and they aren't a mistake. To this day, his words affect my work and my life, and he will always be my hero. Thank you.